You know that feeling when your heart is so full of truth it could burst, and yet your mouth stays silent. You've rehearsed the words 1,000 times. You've felt them building in your chest, pressing against your ribs, begging to be released. But when the moment comes, when you're standing in front of them or holding your phone, something stops you. Not doubt, not confusion, something deeper. Something that feels like protection and paralysis all at once. You can feel everything. The love, the longing, the recognition. You know they feel it too. The energy between you speaks volumes. But the words, the actual words, they won't come. And it's not because you don't love them enough. It's because you love them so much that speaking feels like stepping off a cliff. You're afraid that once you say it, once you make it real with language, something will shatter. The magic, the mystery, the safety of what exists in the space between you. So you stay quiet. You hold it in. You ache in silence. And you wonder if this connection is so divine, so destined, why does it feel impossible to simply say what your soul is screaming? If you've ever felt paralyzed by the depth of what you feel, if you've ever held back your truth because the love felt too big for words, drop a comment below and share where you are in your journey right now. Or simply type "I honor my truth and my timing to claim this energy." And if these messages speak to the deepest parts of your soul, subscribe so you continue receiving the sacred guidance that's meant for you. The truth is, deep love doesn't always mean easy communication. In fact, the deeper the love, the harder it can be to speak. And nowhere is this more true than in the twin flame connection. Because this isn't ordinary love. This isn't the kind of connection where you can text "good morning" and feel satisfied. This is soul recognition. This is the kind of love that doesn't just touch your heart, it rewires your entire being. And when something is that profound, that transformative, that sacred, words can feel inadequate. They can feel like they'll cheapen what you're experiencing. Or worse, they can feel dangerous. Like speaking will expose you in ways you're not ready for. Like opening your mouth will reveal the depth of your vulnerability. And once that's out there, you can't take it back. Have you noticed how you can feel so connected to your twin flame energetically? And yet, when it comes time to actually communicate, everything shuts down. You might feel their presence even when they're not physically near. You might sense their emotions, receive downloads in dreams, experience synchronicities that confirm the connection. But sit down to have a real conversation, and suddenly you're stumbling over words, avoiding eye contact, keeping things surface level. It's not that you don't want to connect. It's that the stakes feel impossibly high. Because you're not just talking to another person, you're talking to the mirror, to the one who sees everything. The one who reflects back not just your light, but your shadows. The one who knows you in ways that terrify you. This is why twin flames can share the most profound energetic intimacy and still struggle with basic communication. Because what you're really afraid of isn't rejection, it's recognition. You're afraid that if you speak your truth, they'll see you completely. And being seen completely means being seen in your wounds, in your fears, in the places where you haven't healed yet. It means standing naked in front of the person whose opinion matters most. And that level of vulnerability, that level of exposure, it's terrifying. Even when you know, deep down, that they're experiencing the exact same fear. there's something you need to understand about the twin flame dynamic. It operates on a frequency that most relationships never touch. While other connections can be built on shared interests, physical attraction, or compatible lifestyles, twin flame love is built on resonance, on energetic alignment, on soul contracts that were written long before you took human form. And because of that, the connection doesn't play by normal rules. You don't get to hide behind small talk. You don't get to build intimacy slowly over time through safe, measured steps. From the moment you meet, everything is accelerated. The depth is immediate. The recognition is instant. And that intensity, while beautiful, can also be overwhelming. This is why silence becomes a refuge. When the connection feels too big, too fast, too exposing, pulling back into silence feels like the only way to catch your breath. It's not that you don't want to communicate. It's that you need space to process what you're feeling. You need time to integrate the shifts happening inside you. Because every interaction with your twin flame, even the brief ones, even the ones that seem insignificant, they trigger something. They activate parts of you that have been dormant. They bring up wounds you thought you'd healed. They show you reflections you're not always ready to see. And sometimes, silence is the only container big enough to hold all of that. But here's what happens in that silence. Both of you retreat into your own worlds, your own processing, your own fears. And because you're not communicating openly, you start making assumptions. You start creating stories about what the other person is thinking, feeling, wanting. She might think he's pulling away because he doesn't care, when really he's pulling away because he cares so much it scares him. He might think she's moved on because she's stopped reaching out, when really she's stopped reaching out because she's trying to honor his space. And in that gap between what's actually happening and what you think is happening, misunderstanding grows. Distance grows. The very thing you were trying to protect by staying silent, the connection itself, starts to feel fragile. This is the paradox of twin flame communication. The love is so real that it demands truth, but the truth feels so vulnerable that it demands silence. And you get stuck in this push and pull, this dance between wanting to be fully seen and wanting to stay protected. Between the soul's desire for union and the ego's need for safety. It's exhausting, it's confusing, and it makes you question everything. If this is really my twin flame, why can't we just talk? If the connection is really divine, why does it feel so complicated? If we're meant to be together, why does every conversation feel like walking through a minefield? Let's talk about what's really happening beneath the surface. Because the communication struggle isn't actually about communication. It's about worthiness. It's about fear. It's about all the ways you've learned to protect yourself from being hurt. When you were younger, maybe you learned that speaking your truth led to rejection. Maybe you learned that being vulnerable meant being abandoned. Maybe you learned that your feelings were too much, too intense, too complicated for others to handle. And now, here you are, in a connection that's asking you to unlearn all of that, to speak even when your voice shakes, to be vulnerable even when it feels unsafe, to trust that your truth won't drive them away. But the wounded parts of you, the parts that remember the pain of past rejections, they're screaming at you to stay quiet. They're telling you that if you reveal too much, you'll lose them. That if you ask for what you need, you'll be too much. That if you admit how deeply you feel, you'll scare them away. And so you edit yourself. You hold back. You say less than what you mean. You keep conversations light when your soul wants to go deep. And all the while, you're dying inside. Because pretending to feel less than you do, that's a special kind of torture. Especially when you know they can feel the truth anyway. Here's what you might not realize. He's doing the same thing. If you're the divine feminine in this connection, if you're the one who's more awake to the spiritual nature of what's happening, you might think he doesn't understand. You might think he's not feeling what you're feeling. But he is. He absolutely is. The difference is, he might not have the language for it. He might not have done the spiritual work to understand what's happening. He might be experiencing this profound soul connection and interpreting it through the only lens he has, which is fear. Fear that he's losing control. Fear that he's feeling too much. Fear that if he admits what's happening, his whole world will change. The masculine energy, whether it's embodied by a man or within you, it's conditioned to be strong, to be certain, to be in control. And this connection, it strips all of that away. It makes him feel things he can't control. It brings up emotions he doesn't know how to process. It asks him to surrender in ways that feel like weakness. And so he does what makes sense to him. He pulls back. He goes silent. He focuses on external things, work, hobbies, other relationships, anything to avoid the intensity of what he's feeling inside. Not because he doesn't love you, but because he loves you so much that it's threatening everything he thought he knew about himself. And the feminine energy, whether it's you or the divine feminine in the connection, she's over here trying to make sense of his silence. She's trying to read between the lines, to find proof that he still cares, to understand why someone who feels so much can say so little. She might chase. She might reach out repeatedly, trying to bridge the gap with her words since he won't use his. Or she might mirror his silence, pulling back into her own protective shell, waiting for him to make the first move. Either way, she's in pain. Because her nature is to connect, to communicate, to weave intimacy through vulnerability. And his silence feels like rejection, even when it's not. This is the dance. This is the pattern that plays out in so many twin flame connections. Both people feeling everything. Both people wanting to connect, but both people too afraid to be the first one to truly open. Too afraid to risk being the one who loves more, who needs more, who wants more. And so you stay in this holding pattern, this energetic stalemate, where the love keeps growing but the communication stays stuck. But something has to shift, because you can't build union on silence. You can't create sacred partnership when both people are hiding. At some point, someone has to be brave enough to speak. Someone has to be willing to risk the vulnerability of saying, I feel you, I see you, I love you, and I'm terrified. And more often than not, that someone is the divine feminine. Not because she's stronger, but because she's been doing the work. She's been facing her shadows. She's been healing her wounds. She's been learning to trust herself, to honor her truth, to speak even when her voice shakes. This is your power, beloved. This is where you step into your role as the catalyst. Not by chasing him, not by trying to force him to communicate before he's ready, but by becoming so anchored in your own truth that your silence transforms from fear into presence. There's a difference between the silence of hiding and the silence of holding space. When you're hiding, you're contracted. You're waiting for him to make it safe for you to speak. You're editing yourself, holding back, playing small. But when you're holding space, you're expanded. You're rooted in your own knowing. You're not waiting for permission to be yourself. You're simply being yourself and allowing him the space to find his way to you. This shift from hiding to holding space, it changes everything. Because when you stop making his silence mean something about your worth, when you stop interpreting his fear as rejection, when you stop needing him to validate the connection before you honor it yourself, something energetic shifts. He feels it. He might not understand it consciously, but his soul registers the change. You're no longer in the energy of need. You're no longer broadcasting, "Please see me, please choose me, please prove this is real." Instead, you're emanating, "I see myself, I choose myself, I know this is real." And that frequency, that sovereign feminine frequency, it's magnetic. But let's be clear about something. This isn't about manipulating him into communication. This isn't about playing games or using spiritual concepts to try to control the outcome. This is about your own liberation. This is about you reclaiming your voice, your truth, your power, not for him, but for you. Because you deserve to live in alignment with what you feel. You deserve to honor the depth of your own heart. You deserve to speak your truth, whether he's ready to hear it or not. And when you give yourself that permission, when you stop waiting for the perfect moment or the guarantee that he'll respond the way you hope, you free yourself from the prison of silence. Here's what starts to happen when you embody this. When you speak your truth, not from need but from fullness, you model something for him. You show him that it's safe to be vulnerable. You demonstrate that speaking from the heart doesn't destroy the connection, it deepens it. You prove that love isn't about perfection, it's about presence. And slowly, in his own time, in his own way, he starts to soften. He starts to realize that his silence isn't protecting him, it's isolating him. He starts to feel the pain of holding back when his soul wants to reach out. And eventually, if he's truly your twin flame, if he's committed to his own growth, he'll find his way to his own truth. But you can't wait for that day to start living yours. You can't put your voice on hold until he finds his, because your truth isn't dependent on his readiness. Your voice isn't less valid because he's not speaking yet. And your love, your deep, soul-level, transformative love, it doesn't need his words to be real. It's already real. It's been real since the moment your souls recognized each other. And the more you honor that, the more you speak from that place of knowing, the more you create the energetic space for true communication to emerge. Now, let's talk about what real communication looks like in a twin flame connection. Because it's not what you think. It's not about having deep philosophical conversations every day. It's not about being able to talk for hours without running out of things to say. Twin flame communication is about energetic honesty. It's about being willing to show up as you are, without the mask, without the performance, without the need to have it all figured out. It's about saying, "I don't know what this is, but I feel it." It's about admitting, "I'm scared, and I don't know what to do with how much I love you." It's about being brave enough to be messy, to be uncertain, to be human. This kind of communication, it doesn't come naturally. Especially if you've spent your whole life learning to hide your true feelings. Especially if you've been conditioned to believe that love should be easy, that the right person won't trigger you, that healthy relationships don't involve this much intensity. But twin flame love isn't here to be easy. It's here to be transformative. And transformation requires you to break open, to let the old ways of relating die, to learn a new language, the language of the soul. And here's the beautiful, terrifying truth. You don't learn this language by studying it. You learn it by speaking it. You learn it by opening your mouth even when you don't have the perfect words. You learn it by sending the message even when you're not sure how it will be received. You learn it by showing up in conversations with your heart open, even when your ego is screaming at you to protect yourself. Every time you choose truth over safety, you're building your capacity for real intimacy. Every time you speak from your soul instead of your fear, you're strengthening the bridge between you. But what if he doesn't respond? What if you finally find the courage to speak your truth and he stays silent? What if you pour your heart out and he doesn't know what to do with it? This is the fear that keeps so many divine feminines trapped in silence. The fear that their truth will be met with emptiness. And I'm not going to lie to you, beloved. That might happen. He might not be ready. He might not have the tools to meet you where you are. He might need more time, more healing, more of his own inner work before he can show up in the way you're hoping for. But here's what you need to understand. His response, or lack of response, doesn't determine the value of your truth. Your voice isn't only worth using if it gets the reaction you want. You speak your truth because it's your truth. Because holding it in is more painful than the risk of it not being received. Because your soul deserves to be expressed, regardless of whether anyone else is ready to witness it fully. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is speak into the void, to say what needs to be said, not because you expect it to change anything, but because you refuse to betray yourself by staying silent. And here's the secret. When you speak from that place of self-honoring rather than outcome-seeking, the energy is completely different. He feels it, even if he doesn't respond right away, even if he needs time to process, even if his fear keeps him quiet. Your truth lands in his field. It plants a seed. It creates a resonance that he can't unfeel. And in his own time, when he's ready, when he's done enough of his own work, he'll find his way back to that truth. He'll find his way back to you. But you can't wait for that moment to live. You can't put your life, your voice, your power on pause while he figures himself out. This is where the divine feminine's journey becomes about so much more than the connection. It becomes about her own sovereignty, her own wholeness, her own willingness to choose herself, even when it means releasing the outcome with him. Because the truth is, you can't control whether he'll ever be ready to communicate openly. You can't force his awakening. You can't love him into healing. All you can do is tend to your own garden. All you can do is speak your own truth. All you can do is become so full, so aligned, so anchored in your own worth that his silence no longer has the power to diminish you. This is the shift that changes everything. When you stop making the relationship the source of your fulfillment and start making yourself the source. When you stop waiting for him to validate the connection and start validating it yourself through how you live, how you love, how you show up. When you stop needing the communication to be easy and start being willing to have the hard conversations anyway. Not because you're trying to force union, but because you're committed to living in integrity with your own heart. And from that place, something miraculous happens. The pressure lifts, the desperation dissolves, the need for him to be different, to do more, to meet you where you are, it softens. Not because you stop caring, but because you realize that your peace isn't dependent on his choices. Your worth isn't determined by his readiness. Your love isn't less real because he's not speaking it out loud. You know what you feel. You know what this connection is. And that knowing becomes your foundation, regardless of whether he ever finds the words. This is what it means to embody the divine feminine in a twin flame connection. It's not about being passive. It's not about waiting in silence forever. It's about being so rooted in your truth that you can hold space for his journey without abandoning your own. It's about speaking when your soul calls you to speak, and being silent when silence serves your peace. It's about releasing the need to control how and when he shows up, while still honoring your own needs, your own boundaries, your own non-negotiables. And yes, sometimes that means walking away. Sometimes that means saying, I love you, I see the divine in you, and I'm choosing myself until you're ready to choose yourself too. Sometimes that means creating distance, not to punish him, but to protect your own energy. Because you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't hold space for his awakening if you're depleting yourself waiting for it. And you can't build a foundation for union if you're constantly sacrificing your own truth to keep the peace. This is the hardest part of the journey, and I need you to really feel that truth in your bones. Learning to love him with every fiber of your being while simultaneously choosing yourself, honoring yourself, putting yourself first. Learning to honor this sacred connection that your soul recognizes as divine while also honoring your own needs, your own boundaries, your own non-negotiables. Learning to hold the vision of what's possible, that beautiful future you can feel in your heart, while also accepting what is right now in this present moment, even when it's painful, even when it's not what you hoped for. This isn't just difficult, beloved. It's one of the most challenging spiritual initiations a soul can go through. It requires a level of emotional maturity that most people never develop in their entire lifetime. It requires you to sit in the paradox without trying to resolve it, to hold both the longing and the letting go in your heart at the same time, to love without attachment while still remaining open to the possibility of union, to stay soft while also staying strong, to remain vulnerable while also maintaining your boundaries, to keep your heart open while also protecting your energy. Can you feel how complex that is? Can you feel how much inner work that demands? But here's what I want you to understand, beloved. You're not most people. You never have been. You're a divine feminine on a twin flame journey, which means you were born different, wired different, coded for something beyond the ordinary human experience, which means you're being called to a level of consciousness that transcends the ordinary, that goes beyond what most people will ever be asked to embody. You're being invited to love in a way that most people can't even comprehend, in a way that defies logic, that challenges everything you were taught about relationships. That asks you to expand beyond every limitation you've ever known. And yes, that's hard. Yes, that's brutally, devastatingly hard at times. Yes, that requires you to face parts of yourself you'd rather avoid, the shadows you've been running from, the wounds you've been trying to hide, the fears that wake you up at 3 in the morning. Yes, that means sitting in the discomfort of uncertainty, of not knowing how this story ends, of loving someone who might not be ready to love you back in the way you deserve, in the way your soul is crying out for. But it also means something profound. It means you're being refined like gold in fire, purified like water flowing through layers of earth, transformed into the highest version of yourself, the version that's been waiting inside you all along, the version that's powerful and sovereign and unshakable. And that transformation, that inner work, that commitment to your own growth regardless of what he's doing or not doing, that's what makes you ready for true union. Not union as a fantasy where everything is perfect and easy. Not union as an escape from your own healing, from the work you came here to do. Not union as a band-aid for your wounds or a solution to your loneliness, but union as a sacred partnership between two whole, sovereign, awakened beings who have done their individual work and are now ready to come together in a way that honors both souls. And you can't get there by staying small, by dimming your light, by pretending to be less than you are. You can't get there by hiding your truth, by swallowing your words, by making yourself convenient for his comfort. You can't get there by waiting for him to make it safe for you to be yourself, by hoping he'll eventually give you permission to shine, by putting your life on hold until he's ready. You get there by becoming yourself so fully that nothing and no one can shake you from that foundation. You get there by doing the work whether he does his or not. You get there by choosing yourself so completely that your wholeness becomes magnetic. So if you've been struggling with communication in your twin flame connection, if the words get stuck in your throat every time you try to express what's really in your heart, if you've been holding back your truth because you're afraid of how he'll respond, afraid he'll run, afraid he'll reject you, afraid he'll confirm your worst fears, if you've been waiting for the perfect moment to finally say what your soul has been screaming, let this be your permission. Let this be the sign you've been asking for. Speak. Open your mouth and let the truth pour out. Not because you know he's ready to hear it, not because you have any guarantee of how he'll receive it, but because you're ready to honor yourself, because you're ready to stop betraying your own soul by staying silent. Not because you're trying to force an outcome, manipulate a response, or control what happens next, but because you refuse to betray your own heart by staying silent, because you refuse to abandon yourself one more time, because you've finally realized that your voice matters more than his comfort, that your truth matters more than his readiness. And if you speak and he doesn't respond the way you hoped, if you pour your heart out and he stays quiet, if you take the risk and it doesn't go the way you imagined, if he pulls back or shuts down or disappears, know this with every cell in your body. You didn't fail. You didn't mess it up. You didn't do it wrong. You didn't say too much or feel too much or want too much. You didn't ruin anything. You didn't push him away. You didn't destroy the connection. You simply honored your truth. You simply chose yourself. You simply did what your soul was calling you to do. And that, beloved, that is never a mistake. that can never be wrong. Because your truth is sacred, it's holy, it's a direct transmission from your soul. Your voice is powerful, more powerful than you've been taught to believe. And your willingness to be vulnerable, even when it's scary, even when your hands are shaking and your heart is pounding, even when there are no guarantees, even when you might lose everything, that's the most courageous thing you can do. That's what real bravery looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. The communication will come, beloved. I need you to trust that. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in the way you expect or the timeline you want. But as you continue to do your work, as you continue to choose yourself over and over again, as you continue to speak your truth regardless of his response, regardless of whether he's listening or ready or available, you create an energetic invitation. You shift the entire frequency of the connection. You become the frequency of openness, of honesty, of authentic connection, of vulnerability without agenda. And that frequency, it's magnetic. It calls him home, not to you as a person he needs to complete him, not to you as his savior or his missing piece, but to himself, to his own truth, to his own heart, to his own willingness to be vulnerable, to open up, to do his own inner work. You become the mirror that reflects back to him what's possible when someone chooses courage over comfort. And when he finally gets there, when he finally does his own work and finds his own voice, when he finally faces his fears and opens his heart, the communication won't be a struggle anymore. It won't feel like pulling teeth or walking on eggshells or trying to decode mixed signals. It will be a natural extension of two people who have both learned to honor themselves, who have both done the work, who have both chosen truth over comfort. It will be a dance, not a battle. A flowing exchange of energy, not a constant fight for understanding. It will be a conversation between equals, not a power struggle between wounded egos trying to protect themselves. Not one person chasing while the other runs. Not one person pouring while the other remains empty. But two whole people meeting in the middle, speaking from their souls, listening with their hearts. And all the silence, all the misunderstanding, all the pain of not being able to speak, all the nights you cried because you felt so alone in this connection, it will make sense. You'll look back and understand why it had to be this way, because it was all part of the journey, all part of the purification, all part of the initiation, all part of what needed to happen for both of you to become ready for real, soul-level communication. The kind of communication that changes everything, the kind that heals lifetimes, the kind that only comes after both people have learned to communicate with themselves first. So, beloved, let this be your reminder today and every day forward. Deep love doesn't always mean easy communication. In fact, sometimes the deepest love comes with the most challenging communication because there's so much at stake, so much to heal, so much to learn. But it always means true communication is possible. Always. It always means the work is worth it. Every tear, every moment of doubt, every time you wanted to give up. It always means that on the other side of the fear, on the other side of the silence, on the other side of the vulnerability, on the other side of every risk you take with your heart, there's a connection waiting that's more real, more profound, more sacred than anything you could have imagined. more beautiful than any fantasy you've created, more healing than any relationship you've experienced before. And you're not just waiting for that connection, beloved. You're not sitting on the sidelines hoping it will magically appear. You're building it, you're creating it, you're calling it in. Every time you choose truth over comfort, every time you honor your voice instead of silencing it, every time you love yourself enough to speak, even when it's terrifying, even when you don't know what will happen next, even when everything in you wants to stay safe and small and silent. Ask yourself one final time and really sit with this question. Am I still hiding behind silence to protect myself, or am I ready to use my voice to free myself? Am I still choosing the illusion of safety over the reality of growth? Am I still prioritizing his comfort over my own soul's expression? Because the moment you choose the latter, everything shifts. Not just externally, but internally. The communication doesn't just improve with him. It improves with yourself. You start hearing your own soul more clearly, receiving the messages that have always been there. You start trusting your own knowing more deeply, that inner wisdom that never lies. You start living from a place of such profound self-honoring that whether he ever finds his voice or not, whether he ever does his work or not, whether union happens in this lifetime or not, you've already found yours. You've already won. You've already become who you came here to be. And that, beloved, that is where your true power lies, not in his response, not in his readiness, not in his ability to meet you, but in your unwavering commitment to meeting yourself, to honoring yourself, to speaking your truth no matter what. That's where your freedom is. That's where your peace is. That's where your power has been waiting all along. Tell me in the comments, have you been holding back your truth in your twin flame connection? What would change if you finally spoke from your soul instead of your fear? Your story might be exactly what another soul needs to hear today, to find the courage to use their own voice.